All right, let's say that you want to use Google Sheets because this table can make you go blind, right? Trying to look things up in this table. And let's say that you are, sorry, I'm jumping around, you are trying to figure out for a 95% interval here, how did they get these values? Because even if you look in the table, so remember those values, 1.96, negative and positive. Even if you go and you look in the table, which I can't seem to find right now, there it is, and you look up 95 close, you see this 1.6, it's not the 1.96, and if you look up 1.96, it's this 0.9750. And even if I put 95 in here, I don't even get this value. So how in the world do they get that value? The issue comes is you read the Z table, and it even shows that in this picture. You are reading from the bottom all the way up to that value. So if you want this Z value right here, you are reading all the way to that value. So what I would be looking at then is, remember that all probabilities must add to 1. So this entire curve adds to 1. So this piece, these two pieces that are missing, and I really only care about this one, is actually 1 minus 0.95 divided by 2. So if you pick your calculators up and you do 1 minus 0.95 and then you divide it by 2, you see that that is 0.025, which is also this area, 0.025. So when you're looking up in a table, you're actually looking up this entire probability, which is 0.025 plus 0.95, and that is actually what you need to type into either Google Sheets or what you're actually looking up in here. So see the 0.9750? That's why it's the 1.96. I go to my Google Sheets and I do that value. So what I have is I have this formula here that says equals NORMINV, the norm inverse, that I have a probability, and that's my E8, and then the standardized 0 and 1. You don't always have to use 0 and 1 unless, you know, like if you're doing an actual problem, but unless you're looking up the actual Z value. So just remember that when it comes to, you know, how you actually, the value, you don't type in 95%, that's here in the actual middle. Now the other thing that's kind of weird is, let's do a 90%, okay? So a 90%, and this one's kind of nice because it even tells you, I'll grab this one right here. Okay, so I'm gonna go back here and let's get a new page. And this one even tells you, you know, it's nice, you can find a lot of these online, and it even tells you it's negative 1.645 or 1.645. And your question might be, well, why is it this value? Why does this one, you know, have an extra decimal place? Well, that takes us back to the table. If you're looking up in the table for exactly 0.95, you can't find it exactly. It's here, 0.9495, and it's also here. They're the same distance apart. So what they did is they added 1.64 plus 1.65, and they averaged those values. I mean, so they actually took the average of, let me go just do it over here on the side, of 1.64 plus 1.65, and they averaged that, and that's how they got this value. But once again, if you are actually doing, you're actually using Google Sheets, what would you type in? Well, I think, I went too far. If for 90%, I think I'm going to need this area down here. So again, how do I do it? The whole thing has to add to 100%. So there's 10% missing, right? There's only 90% here. So that means 5% is down here. and 5% is up here. And so what I even do is, you know, you could even have a different cell or something, but what I try to do is I try to say, well, what's the actual percentage you want? Let me just get rid of all this junk out of my way here. So let's say the actual percentage. And let's say I want 90%. And this is where Google Sheets is so cool if you can learn, you know, how to use this. This is the bottom cutoff, whatever you want to call it. So how do you find the bottom cutoff? It equals 1 minus that middle divided by 2, because half's cut off on the bottom, half's cut off on the top. And now this value, I will simply add these two values. So when you're looking up for a 90% confidence interval, you're actually typing in 95. And I know that confuses students a lot, but the only way I ever could see it is this table, this drawing. This is the middle, but the actual table and even Google Sheets reads from the bottom up until that value.